Sergeant William Thompson stood perfectly still outside the heavy wooden doors of Westminster Abbey. His red uniform was pressed to perfection, every button polished until it gleamed like a mirror. The black fur hat on his head felt heavier than usual today, but he had worn it for 15 years and knew exactly how to balance it without moving a single muscle. Today was different from all the other days he had stood guard. Today, the most important wedding of the decade would take place inside the ancient abbey. Prince Edward, the Queen's youngest nephew, was marrying Lady Catherine Spencer, a woman beloved by the entire nation. Thousands of people lined the streets outside, waving flags and cheering, while millions more watched on television around the world. William had been chosen as the lead guard for this special ceremony. It was the highest honor of his military career. He had served in the Queen's Guard for many years, standing watch at Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and the Tower of London. But this assignment at Westminster Abbey for a royal wedding was something he had dreamed about since joining the regiment. The morning had started before dawn. William and his fellow guards had arrived at the barracks at 4 a.m. to begin their preparations. Each uniform had to be inspected 3 times. Every piece of equipment was checked and double-checked. The rifles they carried were ceremonial, but they still had to be spotless and held with perfect precision. As William stood at his post, he could hear the sounds of preparation inside the abbey. Flower arrangements were being positioned, musicians were tuning their instruments, and the cathedral staff was making final adjustments to ensure everything would be perfect when the guests began arriving. His mind wandered to his own family. His wife Sarah and his 10-year-old daughter Emma were somewhere in the crowd outside, trying to catch a glimpse of the royal procession. Emma had been so excited when she learned that her father would be part of the wedding ceremony. She had told all her friends at school that her daddy was going to guard the prince and princess. The weight of responsibility pressed on William's shoulders like the heavy red wool of his uniform. He knew that millions of eyes would be watching every movement he made. One small mistake, one moment of lost concentration, and it would be remembered forever. The Queen's Guard was famous around the world for their discipline and precision. They never moved, never smiled, never showed any emotion while on duty. A gentle breeze moved through the courtyard, and William could smell the flowers that decorated every corner of the abbey grounds. White roses, lilies, and baby's breath created a sweet fragrance that mixed with the old stone smell of the ancient building. The abbey had hosted royal weddings for nearly 1,000 years, and today would add another chapter to its long and glorious history. Other guards stood at different positions around the abbey. William could see his friend James positioned near the side entrance and Robert stationed by the main gates. They had all trained together, marched together, and served together for years. Today they would make history together. The first guests began arriving in long black cars with small flags fluttering from their hoods. Diplomats, politicians, and members of other royal families stepped out onto the red carpet that had been rolled out for the occasion. Women in elegant dresses and elaborate hats walked carefully up the stone steps, while men in formal mourning coats followed behind them. William watched everything from the corner of his eye without moving his head even slightly. This was part of his training. A guard must be aware of everything happening around him while appearing to see nothing at all. His job was to be a silent protector, a red-coated statue that somehow remained completely alert to any possible danger. The abbey bells began to ring, their deep bronze voices echoing across London and announcing to the world that the ceremony would soon begin. William felt his heartbeat quicken slightly, but his breathing remained steady and controlled. He had practiced this moment in his mind hundreds of times. A group of children from a local school had been invited to watch from a special viewing area. William could hear their excited whispers and see their wide eyes as they stared at the guards in their magnificent red uniforms. He remembered being their age and watching the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace with his own father. That day had inspired him to join the military and work toward earning the right to wear the red coat himself. The sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the air and making the gold braiding on William's uniform sparkle. Photographers positioned themselves at various points around the abbey. Their long camera lenses pointed toward the entrance where the bride would soon arrive. News reporters spoke quietly into microphones, describing the scene for audiences around the world. Inside the abbey, William knew that Prince Edward was probably feeling nervous about the ceremony ahead. The prince was known for his shy personality, very different from his more outgoing cousins. But Lady Catherine had brought out a confidence in him that everyone had noticed. Their love story had captured the hearts of people everywhere, and their wedding was being celebrated as a fairy tale come true. As the morning progressed, more and more distinguished guests arrived. William recognized many faces from newspapers and television. Prime ministers, presidents, movie stars, and business leaders all walked past his position. Each one was dressed in their finest clothes, and many of the women wore jewelry that sparkled like stars in the sunlight. The security around the Abbey was intense, but invisible. Plainclothes officers mixed with the crowds while others watched from rooftops and windows. William and his fellow guards were the visible symbol of protection, but they were part of a much larger security operation designed to ensure that this joyful day remained safe and peaceful. A horse-drawn carriage appeared in the distance, approaching slowly along the street that had been cleared of all traffic. William knew this would be carrying some of the senior members of the royal family. The crowd's cheering grew louder as the carriage came closer, and William felt the excitement building like electricity in the air around him. The golden carriage rolled to a stop directly in front of William's position. Two magnificent white horses snorted and stamped their feet, their breath visible in small puffs of steam despite the warming morning air. The carriage door opened and the Queen herself stepped out, wearing a powder blue coat and matching hat decorated with small pearls. William's training kept him perfectly still, but inside his chest his heart swelled with pride. After 15 years of service, he still felt the same thrill whenever he saw the monarch he had sworn to protect. The Queen moved with graceful dignity, acknowledging the cheering crowds with gentle waves before disappearing into the Abbey. Following behind the Queen came other members of the royal family. Prince Charles arrived with Camilla, both smiling warmly at the gathered crowds. Prince William and Catherine, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, stepped from their own carriage with their young children, who waved enthusiastically at everyone they could see. Little Prince George wore a miniature military uniform that made him look like a tiny soldier. The crowds pressed closer to the barriers, everyone hoping to catch a better glimpse of the royal family. Police officers and security personnel moved smoothly through the area, ensuring that the excitement remained controlled and safe. William noticed how the other guards maintained their positions perfectly, each one a red pillar of discipline amid all the movement and noise. A new sound caught William's attention. The clip-clop of more horses approaching meant that Prince Edward was arriving for his own wedding. The groom's carriage was smaller but equally elegant, decorated with white ribbons and pulled by 4 beautiful black horses. Prince Edward looked nervous but happy as he waved to the crowds who had gathered to celebrate his special day. The prince wore the full dress uniform of his military regiment, with gold braiding across his chest and a ceremonial sword at his side. His dark hair was perfectly combed, and despite his obvious nervousness, he smiled genuinely at the people who had come to wish him well. William remembered his own wedding day 20 years ago, and how terrified he had felt walking into the small country church where Sarah was waiting for him. As Prince Edward entered the Abbey, the crowds began to quiet slightly. Everyone knew that the most anticipated moment was still to come. Lady Catherine's arrival would be the highlight of the morning, and the excitement in the air was almost tangible. Street vendors moved through the crowd selling small British flags, commemorative programs, and cups of hot tea to keep everyone warm while they waited. William could see his fellow guards making tiny adjustments to their positions. James shifted his weight almost imperceptibly from one foot to the other, a movement so small that only another guard would notice it. Robert's eyes moved in a slow, practiced pattern, scanning the crowds and the surrounding buildings for anything unusual. The Abbey bells fell silent, creating a moment of hushed anticipation. In that quiet moment, William could hear individual voices from the crowd, the distant sound of traffic from streets that hadn't been closed, and even the rustling of leaves on the old trees that surrounded the Abbey grounds. A motorcycle escort appeared at the far end of the street, followed by 2 police cars with their lights flashing silently. Behind them came the most magnificent carriage of the day. This was the glass coach reserved for the most special royal occasions, and inside sat Lady Catherine with her father, Earl Spencer. The crowd erupted into the loudest cheers of the day. People waved flags frantically, threw flower petals into the air, and called out congratulations and good wishes. Children sitting on their parents' shoulders pointed excitedly, while elderly people wiped tears of joy from their eyes. William caught his first glimpse of the bride as the carriage drew closer. Lady Catherine looked absolutely radiant in a white silk gown that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Her veil flowed behind her like a cloud, and the diamond tiara she wore caught the light and sent tiny rainbows dancing across the carriage windows. The carriage stopped, and a footman in royal livery opened the door. Earl Spencer stepped out first, looking proud and emotional as he prepared to walk his daughter down the aisle. He wore a formal morning coat with a silver waistcoat, and his usually steady hands trembled slightly as he reached back to help his daughter from the carriage. Lady Catherine emerged like a princess from a fairy tale. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of design, with delicate lace covering her arms and a long train that flowed behind her. The dress had been created by the same designers who had made gowns for other royal brides, and every detail was absolutely perfect. Her bridesmaids followed her from a second carriage, 6 young women in soft pink dresses that complemented the bride's white gown perfectly. They moved with practiced grace, each one carrying a small bouquet of white roses tied with silver ribbons. The youngest bridesmaid was only 8 years old, Prince Edward's niece, who looked adorable in her miniature version of the adult dresses. William watched as Lady Catherine paused at the Abbey entrance to have her train arranged properly. Her dress designer and several assistants fussed over every fold and pleat, ensuring that she would look absolutely perfect as she walked down the aisle. The bride's mother stood nearby, tears of happiness streaming down her face as she watched her daughter prepare for the most important moment of her life. The crowd had fallen into a respectful hush as they watched these final preparations. Even the youngest children seemed to understand that they were witnessing something truly special. Camera flashes sparkled like stars throughout the crowd as everyone tried to capture the magical moment. Lady Catherine looked up at the ancient abbey that would soon become the setting for her marriage to Prince Edward. The building had stood for nearly 1,000 years, witnessing the coronations of kings and queens, royal weddings, and state funerals. Today it would add her name to the long list of brides who had walked down its aisle. The bride's bouquet was a work of art in itself. White roses, lily of the valley, and small sprigs of myrtle created a fragrant arrangement that had been designed to complement both her dress and the abbey's flower decorations. Hidden within the bouquet was a small sprig of rosemary for remembrance, a tradition that royal brides had followed for generations. As Lady Catherine took her father's arm and prepared to enter the abbey, William felt a surge of emotion that he had to carefully control. This was why he had dedicated his life to serving the royal family. Moments like this, when tradition and love came together in perfect harmony, reminded him of the honor and privilege of wearing the red uniform. The massive wooden doors of Westminster Abbey swung open, revealing the breathtaking interior that had been transformed into a garden of white flowers and golden candlelight. Lady Catherine took a deep breath, squeezed her father's arm, and stepped across the threshold into the abbey where her future awaited. William shifted his position slightly to get a better view of the ceremony while maintaining his guard duties. Through the open doors he could see the abbey filled with nearly 2,000 guests, all standing as the bride began her procession down the aisle. The music swelled from the massive organ, filling the ancient stone walls with a melody that seemed to make the very air vibrate with joy. The Archbishop of Canterbury stood waiting at the altar, his ceremonial robes gleaming with gold thread. Prince Edward had taken his position, and William could see the nervous smile on the prince's face as he caught his first glimpse of his bride. The prince's best man, his older brother Prince Alexander, stood beside him, ready to hand over the wedding rings when the moment came. From his position outside, William could hear the rustling of silk and the soft footsteps of the bride and her attendants as they made their way down the aisle. The abbey's acoustics carried every sound clearly, from the gentle sobbing of emotional guests to the whispered prayers of those who were deeply moved by the ceremony. The crowds outside remained remarkably quiet, straining to hear whatever they could of the ceremony taking place inside. Many people held small radios or mobile phones, listening to live broadcasts of the wedding service. Others simply stood in respectful silence, feeling honored to be present at such a historic moment, even if they couldn't see inside the abbey. William's fellow guard James caught his attention with an almost invisible signal. A group of protesters had appeared at the far end of the street, carrying signs and chanting something about royal privilege. The demonstration was small and peaceful, but it was James's job to alert the other guards to any unusual activity. William acknowledged the signal with the tiniest movement of his eyes, then returned his attention to the Abbey entrance. Inside the Abbey, the ceremony had reached the exchange of vows. William could hear Prince Edward's voice strong and clear despite his nervousness, as he promised to love and honor Lady Catherine for the rest of his life. When Lady Catherine spoke her vows in return, her voice carried such genuine emotion that even the guards outside could feel the love and commitment in her words. The Archbishop's voice rose above all others as he pronounced the couple husband and wife. The Abbey erupted in cheers and applause that echoed off the stone walls and spilled out into the courtyard where William stood. Church bells throughout London began ringing in celebration, creating a symphony of bronze voices that announced the royal marriage to the entire city. William felt a profound sense of satisfaction knowing that he had played a part in protecting this joyful moment. Every hour of training, every early morning drill, every ceremony he had participated in had led to this day. The red uniform he wore represented centuries of tradition and service, and he was proud to continue that legacy. The newlyweds appeared in the Abbey doorway, and the crowd outside exploded into the loudest cheers of the day. Prince Edward and Princess Catherine, as she would now be known, stood together at the top of the Abbey steps, both glowing with happiness. The princess's dress sparkled in the sunlight, and her new husband looked more confident and joyful than William had ever seen him. Photographers captured every moment as the couple waved to the celebrating crowds. The princess's tiara caught the light and sent small rainbows dancing across the ancient stone walls of the Abbey. Her smile was radiant, and Prince Edward couldn't seem to stop grinning as he looked at his new wife, and then at the thousands of people who had come to celebrate with them. The royal family emerged from the Abbey behind the newlyweds. The Queen appeared pleased and moved by the ceremony, dabbing at her eyes with a small handkerchief. Prince Charles and Camilla looked relaxed and happy, while Prince William and Catherine smiled warmly as their children waved. Enthusiastically at the crowds, William watched as the official wedding photographer arranged the family for formal pictures on the Abbey steps. The photographer worked quickly and efficiently, knowing that every moment was precious and that the crowds were eager to see more of the new royal couple. The bridesmaids arranged Princess Catherine's train carefully, ensuring that every fold would look perfect in the official photographs. A flight of ceremonial aircraft appeared overhead, flying in perfect formation to honor the royal wedding. The Red Arrows, Britain's famous aerobatic team, painted trails of red, white, and blue smoke across the clear sky. The crowd pointed upward and cheered as the planes passed over Westminster Abbey, adding a spectacular finale to an already perfect day. The newlyweds climbed into the same glass coach that had brought the bride to the Abbey. But now they rode together as husband and wife, waving to the crowds as their carriage began the procession back to Buckingham Palace. The princess had changed into a going-away outfit, an elegant blue dress with a matching jacket that complemented her new husband's military uniform perfectly. William maintained his position as the royal procession passed by, but he allowed himself a small smile as the happy couple waved directly at him. Princess Catherine caught his eye for just a moment and gave him a special nod of acknowledgement, recognizing his role in making her wedding day safe and perfect. The crowds began to follow the carriage procession, hoping to catch another glimpse of the newlyweds at Buckingham Palace. Families packed up their picnic baskets and folded their lawn chairs, but many people lingered around Westminster Abbey, reluctant to let this magical day come to an end. Street cleaners appeared as if by magic, working efficiently to restore the Abbey grounds to their normal appearance. The red carpet was rolled up, the flower arrangements were carefully removed, and the barriers that had held back the crowds were taken down. Within hours, Westminster Abbey would look exactly as it had before the royal wedding. But everyone who had been present would remember this day forever. William and his fellow guards remained at their positions until all the guests had departed and the Abbey was secure. Their job wasn't finished until every last detail had been attended to, and the ancient building was safely closed for the evening. As the last of the wedding guests departed Westminster Abbey, William finally allowed himself to relax slightly. His shoulders ached from standing perfectly still for over 6 hours, and his feet were numb inside his polished black boots. But the ceremony had gone flawlessly. and he felt immense pride in the role he and his fellow guards had played in protecting such an important moment in British history. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Abbey courtyard, and the air had grown cooler as evening approached. William could hear the distant sounds of celebration continuing throughout London. People were gathering in pubs and parks, watching television broadcasts of the wedding highlights and toasting the happiness of the new royal couple. His commanding officer, Colonel Morrison, approached the guards' positions for the final inspection of the day. The colonel was a stern but fair man who had served in the Queen's Guard for over 30 years. He walked slowly past each guard, checking their uniforms and acknowledging their excellent performance with subtle nods of approval. When Colonel Morrison reached William's position, he paused for a moment longer than usual. "Outstanding work today, Sergeant Thompson," he said quietly, his voice carrying the respect that one professional soldier gives to another. The Queen herself commented on the exceptional bearing of the guards during the ceremony. William felt his chest swell with pride, but he kept his expression neutral and professional. A compliment from the Queen, passed down through the chain of command, was the highest honor a guard could receive. It meant that his years of dedication and service had been noticed and appreciated by the very person he had sworn to protect. The colonel continued his inspection, speaking briefly with each guard before dismissing them to return to their barracks. William waited for his official release from duty, watching as the Abbey staff finished their cleanup work. The beautiful flower arrangements that had decorated the entrance were being carefully packed away, probably to be donated to hospitals and nursing homes where they could bring joy to people who hadn't been able to witness the wedding in person. A young page boy emerged from the Abbey, still wearing his ceremonial outfit, but looking tired after the long day. He had been one of 6 pages who had carried Princess Catherine's train during the ceremony, a responsibility that he had practiced for weeks. William remembered being that age and dreaming of being part of such an important event. As William finally received permission to stand down, he felt the blood rushing back into his legs and feet. He flexed his fingers carefully, working feeling back into hands that had gripped his ceremonial rifle for hours without moving. The other guards were going through the same process, each one carefully stretching muscles that had been held rigid for most of the day. The walk back to the barracks gave William time to reflect on the day's events. He had witnessed something truly special, a moment when the entire nation had come together to celebrate love and tradition. The faces in the crowd had shown such genuine happiness and excitement, proving that the royal family still held a special place in the hearts of the British people. Back at the barracks, the atmosphere was celebratory but controlled. The guards were proud of their performance, but they were also professional soldiers who knew that tomorrow would bring new responsibilities and challenges. They helped each other out of their heavy ceremonial uniforms, hanging each piece carefully so that it would be ready for the next important occasion. William's red tunic felt incredibly heavy as he lifted it over his head. The wool fabric was thick and warm, designed to look impressive rather than be comfortable. The gold braiding and brass buttons would need to be polished again before the uniform could be stored away. But that was a task for tomorrow. His friend James came over as William was unlacing his tall black boots. "Did you see Princess Catherine smile at us when she passed by?" James asked, grinning despite his exhaustion. "I've never felt prouder to wear this uniform." William nodded, remembering that special moment when the new princess had acknowledged their service. It was gestures like that which reminded him why he had chosen a career in the Queen's Guard. The royal family understood and appreciated the dedication required to maintain the high standards of ceremonial duty. Their other guards shared their own memories of the day as they changed into their regular clothes. Robert mentioned how emotional the Queen had looked during the ceremony, while another guard talked about the precision of the RAF flyover that had marked the end of the service. Each man had his own perspective on the day's events, but all of them felt honored to have been part of something so historically significant. As William packed away his ceremonial equipment, he thought about his family. Sarah and Emma would be waiting at home, eager to hear about his experience from the inside of the royal wedding. Emma would want to know every detail about the princess's dress, while Sarah would be interested in the security arrangements and the behavior of the crowds. The evening news was already broadcasting highlights from the wedding ceremony. William could see television screens in the barracks common room, showing the royal couple's carriage procession and the cheering crowds lining the streets of London. The coverage would continue for days, with experts analyzing every detail of the ceremony and fashion, commentators discussing the princess's dress and jewelry. William's mobile phone buzzed with text messages from friends and family members who had seen him on television during the live broadcast. His brother had sent a picture he had taken of the television screen, showing William standing at attention during the arrival of the royal family. His sister had messaged to say how proud their late parents would have been to see him playing such an important role in a royal wedding. The barracks kitchen had prepared a special celebration dinner for all the guards who had participated in the wedding ceremony. The meal was simple but delicious, and the conversation around the tables was animated as the men discussed the day's events and shared their observations about the ceremony and the crowds. Colonel Morrison joined the guards for dinner, something he rarely did except on special occasions. He raised a toast to their professionalism and dedication, acknowledging that their performance had upheld the finest traditions of the Queen's Guard. The colonel also mentioned that several international news organizations had specifically commented on the impressive bearing and discipline of the British Guards. As the evening wore on, William began to feel the exhaustion of the long day settling into his bones. Standing at attention for 6 hours required a special kind of physical and mental endurance that most people couldn't understand, but it was a challenge that he and his fellow guards had trained for and accepted as part of their duty to the crown. William arrived home just as the sun was setting over London, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that seemed to reflect the joyful mood of the entire city. His small house in the suburbs felt like a peaceful refuge after the excitement and intensity of the royal wedding. Sarah met him at the front door, her face glowing with pride and excitement. "I saw you on television," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around him despite his protests that he was still dusty from the long day. "You look so handsome and professional standing there at the Abbey. Emma has been telling everyone at school that her daddy guarded the royal wedding." Emma bounded down the stairs, still wearing the special dress that Sarah had bought for watching the wedding ceremony. She had insisted on dressing up for the occasion, saying that if her father was going to be part of a royal wedding, then she should look her best too. Her eyes were bright with excitement and 1,000 questions. "Daddy, did you see the princess's dress up close?" Emma asked, pulling him toward the living room where the television was still broadcasting wedding coverage. "Was it really as beautiful as it looked on TV? Did she really smile at you? Did the prince look nervous?" William laughed at his daughter's enthusiasm and settled into his favorite armchair, finally allowing himself to truly relax for the first time in over 12 hours. Sarah brought him a cup of tea and his favorite biscuits, then curled up beside him on the sofa to hear all about his experience at Westminster Abbey. As William described the day's events, he watched Emma's face light up with wonder. He told her about the magnificent horses that had pulled the royal carriages, the incredible flower arrangements that had decorated the Abbey, and the moment when the church bells had rung out across London to announce the royal marriage. Emma listened with rapt attention, asking questions about every detail. "The most amazing thing," William said, "was seeing how happy everyone looked. From the Queen herself down to the little children in the crowd, everyone was smiling and celebrating. It reminded me why I love serving the royal family and protecting these special moments." Sarah squeezed his hand, understanding the emotion in his voice. She knew how much his career meant to him, and how proud he was to wear the red uniform of the Queen's Guard. She had watched him practice for this day, spending extra hours at the barracks to ensure that his performance would be absolutely perfect. The television showed highlights from the wedding reception at Buckingham Palace, where the royal family and their guests were celebrating with dinner and dancing. William could see the same rooms where he had stood guard during other state occasions, now filled with flowers and elegant decorations for the wedding celebration. Emma fell asleep on the sofa beside her father, exhausted by the excitement of the day and lulled by his gentle voice as he continued to describe the ceremony. William carried her up to her bedroom, tucking her in carefully and promising to tell her more stories about the royal wedding tomorrow. When he came back downstairs, Sarah was recording the late-night news coverage of the wedding. "I want to save this forever," she explained. "Emma's children will want to see the day when their grandfather helped protect a royal wedding at Westminster Abbey." William felt touched by his wife's thoughtfulness. She understood that this day would become one of the most treasured memories of his entire career. Years from now, when he was retired and telling stories to his grandchildren, this would be one of the moments he would remember most clearly. The news coverage included interviews with some of the guests who had attended the ceremony. A famous actress described the emotional moment when Princess Catherine had walked down the aisle, while a politician talked about the significance of the wedding for British tourism and international relations. Everyone seemed to agree that the day had been a perfect celebration of love, tradition, and national pride. William's phone continued to buzz with messages from colleagues and friends who had seen him on television during the live broadcast. His old sergeant from his early days in the army had sent a particularly touching message, saying how proud he was to see William representing the Queen's Guard with such distinction. As the evening grew late, William and Sarah watched the final highlights from the wedding coverage. The broadcaster showed the moment when the royal couple had appeared on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, waving to the crowds below and sharing a kiss that had been photographed by hundreds of cameras. "Do you think they'll be happy?" Sarah asked, watching the genuine affection between Prince Edward and Princess Catherine on the screen. William nodded thoughtfully. "I think so. You could see the love between them during the ceremony, and they both understand the responsibilities that come with being part of the royal family. They'll face challenges, but they seem to have the strength to handle whatever comes their way." Sarah turned off the television, and they sat together in the quiet darkness of their living room. Outside, they could still hear distant sounds of celebration from the local pub, where people were continuing to toast the royal couple's happiness. The entire nation seemed to be united in joy and optimism about the future. "Thank you for being part of something so beautiful today," Sarah said softly. "I know how much preparation went into this, and how important it was for everything to go perfectly. You and the other guards made sure that Prince Edward and Princess Catherine could have the wedding of their dreams." William squeezed his wife's hand, feeling grateful for her understanding and support. Being a member of the Queen's Guard required sacrifices from the entire family, not just the soldier himself. There were early mornings, long hours, and times when duty had to come before family plans. But days like today made all those sacrifices worthwhile. William had been part of a moment that would be remembered in British history for generations to come. He had helped protect a celebration of love and tradition that had brought joy to millions of people around the world. As they prepared for bed, William looked out the window at the lights of London spread below them. Somewhere in the city, Prince Edward and Princess Catherine were beginning their new life together as husband and wife. The security teams had safely delivered them to their private celebration, and now they could enjoy their wedding night knowing that they were protected and cherished by the entire nation. William felt a deep sense of satisfaction as he finally allowed himself to rest. Tomorrow would bring new responsibilities and challenges, but tonight he could sleep peacefully, knowing that he had served his queen and country with honor and distinction on one of the most important days in recent royal history. 3 weeks after the royal wedding, William stood in Colonel Morrison's office, still feeling somewhat surprised by the unexpected summons. The morning had started like any other, with routine guard duties at Buckingham Palace, but the message to report to the colonel's office immediately had interrupted his normal schedule. Colonel Morrison looked up from the official documents spread across his desk, his expression serious but not unfriendly. "Sergeant Thompson, please take a seat," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "I have some rather unusual news to share with you." William sat down carefully, his mind racing through possibilities. Had he made some mistake during the wedding ceremony that had only now come to light? Had someone filed a complaint about the guard's performance? He kept his expression neutral and waited for the colonel to continue. "I've received a letter from Buckingham Palace," Colonel Morrison began, holding up an envelope with the royal seal. "It seems that Princess Catherine was quite impressed with the bearing and professionalism of the guards during her wedding ceremony. She has specifically requested that you and several of your colleagues be assigned to her personal protection detail." William felt his eyes widen in surprise. Assignment to a personal royal protection detail was one of the highest honors available to a member of the Queen's Guard. Such positions were typically reserved for the most experienced and trusted soldiers, and they usually required years of additional training and security clearance. "The princess mentioned you by name," Colonel Morrison continued, consulting the letter. "She wrote that your presence at Westminster Abbey made her feel safe and confident during what could have been an overwhelming experience. She believes that having familiar faces among her security team would help her adjust to her new role as a member of the royal family. The colonel set down the letter and looked directly at William. This is an extraordinary opportunity, Sergeant. Personal protection assignments can last for years, and they often lead to advancement within the royal household. However, the work is demanding and requires a different set of skills than ceremonial duties. William's mind immediately turned to his family. A personal protection assignment would mean irregular hours, frequent travel, and long periods away from home. But it would also mean better pay, increased responsibility, and the chance to serve the royal family in a more direct way. What would my duties involve, sir? William asked, wanting to understand exactly what he would be committing to. You would be part of Princess Catherine's close protection team, Colonel Morrison explained. This means accompanying her to public engagements, official visits, and private functions. You would work closely with police protection officers and other security personnel to ensure the princess's safety at all times. The colonel opened a thick folder containing detailed information about the position. The training program begins next month and lasts for 6 weeks. You'll learn advanced security techniques, diplomatic protocol, and emergency procedures. The work requires absolute discretion and complete dedication to the princess's well-being. William thought about Princess Catherine's smile at the wedding, how she had acknowledged his service with that special nod. The idea of being trusted with her protection on a daily basis was both thrilling and intimidating. He would be responsible for the safety of someone who was quickly becoming one of the most beloved members of the royal family. There's one more thing, Colonel Morrison added, his tone becoming more serious. This assignment comes with a significant pay increase and additional benefits for your family. The royal household understands that personal protection officers make sacrifices, and they compensate accordingly. The financial benefits would make a real difference for William's family. Emma was getting older and would soon need money for university, while Sarah had been talking about taking some courses to advance her own career. The extra income would give them opportunities they had only dreamed about before. I'm honored by Princess Catherine's confidence in me, William said carefully. May I have some time to discuss this with my wife before making a decision? Colonel Morrison nodded approvingly. Of course. This is a major career change that affects your entire family. Take the weekend to think it over and let me know your decision on Monday morning. That evening, William sat at his kitchen table with Sarah, explaining the unexpected opportunity that had been offered to him. Emma listened from the doorway, her eyes growing wide as she realized what this could mean for their family. Princess Catherine specifically asked for you? Sarah said, her voice filled with amazement. She remembered you from all those hundreds of people at the wedding? William nodded, still somewhat overwhelmed by the honor. The colonel said she wrote that my presence made her feel safe during the ceremony. She wants familiar faces on her protection team as she adjusts to royal life. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering all the implications. It would mean more time away from home, she said finally. But it's also an incredible opportunity for advancement. How often do chances like this come along? Emma stepped into the kitchen, unable to contain her excitement any longer. Does this mean you would travel with the princess? Would you go to other countries and meet famous people? Could we ever meet her? William laughed at his daughter's enthusiasm. It would certainly be different from standing guard at the palace gates, he admitted. The work would be more varied and challenging, and yes, there would probably be some travel involved. Over the weekend, the family discussed the pros and cons of accepting the assignment. Sarah worried about the increased security risks that came with personal protection work, while William was concerned about spending more time away from home. But they both recognized that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. On Sunday evening, they reached their decision together. The benefits outweighed the challenges, and William's dedication to serving the royal family made the choice clear. He would accept Princess Catherine's offer and begin the journey toward becoming one of her personal protection officers. Monday morning found William back in Colonel Morrison's office, ready to formally accept the assignment. The colonel seemed pleased but not surprised by his decision. I thought you would accept, he said. Your dedication to duty and your family's support make you an ideal candidate for this position. The paperwork was extensive, requiring detailed background checks, medical examinations, and security clearances. William would need to undergo psychological evaluation to ensure he could handle the stress and responsibility of personal protection work. Every aspect of his life would be scrutinized to ensure he was suitable for such a sensitive position. "Your training begins in 2 weeks," Colonel Morrison informed him. "You'll be working with some of the most experienced security professionals in the country. The skills you learn will serve you well throughout your career with the royal household." As William left the colonel's office, he felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness about the path ahead. He was leaving behind the familiar world of ceremonial duties to enter a more complex and demanding role. But Princess Catherine's personal request had shown him that his service was valued and appreciated at the highest levels. That afternoon, William called his parents to share the news of his promotion. His mother cried with pride when she heard that Princess Catherine had specifically requested his services, while his father offered practical advice about the challenges of protection work based on his own military experience. The local newspaper somehow learned about William's assignment and wanted to interview him about his selection for Princess Catherine's protection team. However, the royal household's strict rules about media contact meant that he had to decline all interviews. Discretion and privacy were essential parts of his new role. 1 year later, William stood in the gardens of Kensington Palace watching Princess Catherine interact with a group of children from a local charity. His role as her personal protection officer had transformed his understanding of royal duty from ceremonial tradition to active service. The red uniform had been replaced by a dark suit and earpiece, but his dedication to protecting the royal family remained unchanged. The princess moved gracefully among the children, listening to their stories and asking thoughtful questions about their artwork. William positioned himself nearby, his trained eyes constantly scanning the surroundings while maintaining the invisible presence that his job required. After months of working together, he and Princess Catherine had developed an easy professional relationship, built on mutual respect and trust. "Officer Thompson," Princess Catherine called softly, using the formal title that maintained appropriate boundaries while acknowledging their working partnership. "Could you help organize the children for the group photograph?" William stepped forward smoothly, his experience with royal protocol making such requests second nature. He gently guided the excited children into position, ensuring that everyone would be visible in the official pictures while maintaining the security perimeter that his training demanded. As the photographer captured the moment, William reflected on how much his life had changed since that morning at Westminster Abbey. The advanced training program had been intense, covering everything from emergency medical procedures to international diplomatic protocol. He had learned to drive armored vehicles, coordinate with foreign security services, and manage crowds while remaining virtually invisible. The travel had been extraordinary. In the past year, he had accompanied Princess Catherine to official visits in 12 different countries. He had stood guard in ancient palaces, modern embassies, and remote villages where the princess's charitable work took her. Each location presented unique challenges that required quick thinking and careful preparation. His favorite assignments were the charitable events like today's gathering. William had watched Princess Catherine's genuine compassion transform the lives of countless people, from elderly residents in nursing homes to young patients in children's hospitals. Her ability to connect with people from all backgrounds had impressed him more than any ceremonial pageantry. The security challenges were real and constant. William had coordinated responses to suspicious packages, managed overly enthusiastic crowds, and worked with intelligence services to assess potential threats. But he had also learned that the greatest danger to the princess's well-being often came from her own determination to connect with people, sometimes against security advice. "She wants to help everyone," William had explained to Sarah during one of their evening conversations. "Sometimes my job is protecting her from her own generous instincts." Sarah had adapted well to the demands of his new career. The irregular hours and travel schedule required careful planning, but the financial security and pride in William's important work made the sacrifices worthwhile. Emma, now 11 years old, had become something of a celebrity at school because of her father's connection to the royal family. The protection team had become like a second family to William. He worked closely with Detective Inspector Sarah Jenkins, an experienced police officer who served as the princess's lead protection officer. Their partnership required complete trust and seamless coordination, qualities that had developed through months of shared responsibility. Today's event was wrapping up successfully, with no security incidents and obvious joy from both the princess and the children she had come to visit. William coordinated with the local police to ensure safe departure routes, while Princess Catherine said her personal goodbyes to each child. As they prepared to leave Kensington Palace, Princess Catherine paused beside William's position. "Thank you for another smooth event," she said quietly. "Your discretion and professionalism make it possible for me to focus completely on the people we're here to serve." William felt the same pride he had experienced on her wedding day, knowing that his service enabled these important connections between the royal family and the public. "It's my honor to serve you, Your Royal Highness," he replied with genuine sincerity. The drive back to Kensington Palace gave William time to update his security reports and coordinate with the advance team for tomorrow's engagements. Princess Catherine had 3 public appearances scheduled, each requiring detailed planning and risk assessment. The work never really stopped, but William had learned to find satisfaction in the complexity and importance of his responsibilities. That evening, William attended a briefing for Princess Catherine's upcoming state visit to Canada. As part of the advance team, he would travel ahead to coordinate security arrangements with Canadian authorities. The visit would include meetings with government officials, charity events, and a ceremonial welcome that would require the same precision he had once brought to guard duty at Westminster Abbey. His phone buzzed with a text message from Emma, who was doing a school project about the Canadian provinces. "Dad, can you bring me something from Canada for my presentation?" she had written, followed by several excited emoji. William smiled as he typed back his promise to find something special for her project. His daughter's enthusiasm for his work had never diminished, and she took every opportunity to share her pride in his service to the royal family. Colonel Morrison approached William after the briefing, carrying a folder with official documents. "Sergeant Thompson," he said, using William's military rank despite his current civilian role. "I have some news that I think you'll find interesting." William accepted the folder with curiosity, opening it to find a formal letter from Buckingham Palace. As he read the contents, his eyes widened with surprise and gratitude. Princess Catherine had recommended him for the Royal Victorian Order, a personal honor from the Queen that recognized exceptional service to the royal family. "This is extraordinary," Colonel Morrison explained. "The princess wrote a detailed letter praising your dedication, professionalism, and the way you've helped her adjust to royal life. Awards like this typically take years of service to earn." William felt overwhelmed by the recognition. The Royal Victorian Order was given only to those who had provided exceptional personal service to the monarch or royal family members. It represented not just professional achievement, but personal trust and appreciation from Princess Catherine herself. As he drove home that night, William thought about the journey that had brought him from standing guard at Westminster Abbey to receiving one of the highest honors available to royal household staff. The red uniform had been the beginning, but his true service had evolved into something much more personal and meaningful. Sarah and Emma were waiting with a celebration dinner when he shared the news of his honor. Emma immediately wanted to know if he would meet the Queen when he received the award, while Sarah simply held him close, understanding how much this recognition meant to his sense of purpose and achievement. The next morning, William returned to work with renewed dedication, knowing that Princess Catherine's trust in him had been validated at the highest levels. As he took his position for another day of protection duties, he carried with him the same pride and commitment that had first inspired him to wear the red uniform of the Queen's Guard.